Being a single mom and doing it all by yourself is brutal. Learn the brain and energy tools to get back to your center and overcome your challenges. Hi, are you struggling with being a different mom than the one you are presenting the world? Do you maybe suffer from the good mom impostor syndrome? If that's you, you don't want to miss this show. You want to stay with us because that's what we're going to talk today. And we'll provide solutions because I have an expert for you. But before I introduce my expert, my guest here, welcome if you are watching that on replay. Don't forget to say hi. I love seeing that you came and said hi. And I love interacting with you. You can ask questions. Even if it's replay, I always say, replay is the new life. My name is Muriel Felous, and if you are new to me, I help single moms with avoiding arguments with their teenagers. And you can find us here, or you can find me on my website at singleanddoingitall.com. I am also known as your French life coach, but I'm sure you knew that because that's the name of the page. If you want to be notified when I go live, all you have to do is to give me a notify-me below, and you'll be automatically added to the list for being being pinged or receiving a message before I go live. So now let's welcome our audio episode and our guest. Because as you know, if you are in the Facebook studio today, this episode will also go live on iTunes and YouTube. So for our audio listeners, I want to welcome them as it should be. So here we go. Welcome to Single and Doing It All, the podcast for single moms. Today, we are going to talk about the good mom imposter syndrome. And in order to provide you with the best information, I have a guest for me. Her name is Emee Vida Estacio, and I will have to confirm with her that that's the way to pronounce her name. Yeah. She's a chartered psychologist and founder of PAMI Code, the PAMI Code. And her passion is to help people embrace their true worth so they can live happy and fulfilling lives. So welcome, Emee. How are you?
Thank you very much, Muriel. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh, I'm happy you're here too. And as I was saying, I'm happy that you're going to provide us with your expertise on the imposter syndrome, because I know that you help a lot of people with that matter.
Yes, I've actually written a book on that. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with your audience, because a lot of people experience this. Actually, 70% of us will experience imposter syndrome at some point in our lives.
Yes, and there are so many ways to to experience that. I know it's very frequent in business, because having a business, I had to take care of my imposter syndrome. And it's also a matter for single moms, because we always are afraid or carrying in the background this belief that we may not be a good mom. First, before we go into the subject, I would like to ask you, what brought you to do what you are doing today? What's your story?
Oh, what's my story? Okay. Well, to tell you the truth, psychology wasn't really my first choice of, in terms of career. When I graduated from high school, I actually got into med school immediately. But my mom said, you're probably not ready to go into med school yet, because I was actually 15 years old at that time.
Wow.
So she said, you're still a kid. You might experience losing a patient. You might experience, some really difficult circumstances in med school. So what she suggested was for me to go into pre-med first. So I said, okay, fine. I was like, oh, what a shame, because I really wanted to become a pediatrician, actually. So I took psychology just because I needed to go, do a pre-med course. And it turns out I loved it. So I ended up pursuing a master's. When I finished my undergrad in psychology, I loved it. I came here to the UK. I went to London, did my master's, did my PhD, did my postdoc, and ended up being a psychologist, a university lecturer in psychology. So I've been lecturing at the university for 10 years,
Wow.
and I sort of felt like, is this it? Is this everything that I can do with psychology? It felt a little bit limited because, although I'm really enjoying my interaction with students, I can see the impact that I can see that they are learning and they are growing as they go through their learning experience at the university. I still felt as if it was limited. I felt as if there's so much more that I can do outside of academia. And that's when I thought, okay, there's so much that I know about psychology. Now I'm studying psychology for more than 20 years now. I said, okay, I know a lot about psychology. Maybe I should write something, maybe write a self help book that would apply the principles of psychology so people can use it in their day to day lives to improve themselves. So the
Yes.
first book that I wrote, it was called Change Your Life for Good. And I was using all of the techniques, I was discussing the techniques that I know from psychology and, apply it, help people to apply it in their day to day lives. And then the second book, it was all about imposter syndrome, which is something that we are going to talk about today because I know from my personal experience as well, even with all my qualifications and experience, I still feel as if I'm just fooling everyone into believing that I'm good at what I do, even if the evidence shows that I'm actually good at what I do.
Yeah.
So it's about learning to embrace our worth. So I wrote about that. And the third one is about fear, fear is not my enemy. How do we manage fear? How can we cope with fear? And for the things that I know about psychology, I've written all the techniques in there so people can actually use psychological techniques to improve their lives and embrace their worth. So that's why I'm here now. What I'm doing, what I do now. It's really trying to make the most of what I know from psychology and helping people to use psychology to improve themselves.
So the listeners and the viewers can realize now that I wasn't lying when I said you were an expert. So young with so many accomplishments. It's really amazing, so rich. Um, so the imposter syndrome, that when you help people with it, who is the most common person that's coming to you? Is it more in a professional setting, or what are the majority of your clients?
Yeah, most of them are coming from a business perspective, or they usually come forward to talk about their careers. But I've actually noticed as well, in terms of my interactions on Facebook, because I'm quite active in Facebook groups, a lot of moms do experience imposter syndrome. A lot of moms who return to work after maternity leave, they feel as if they've been out of work for a while, and they feel as if they are just fooling everyone into believing that they're still good at what they do,
Oh,
when
yeah,
actually they are still quite, you don't lose the skills
true.
that you have, you don't lose your experience, you don't use your knowledge just because you had a baby, right? But they feel as if they are fooling everyone into believing that they are good at what they do. So I've seen a lot of, actually, yes, moms who return to work, and when they talk about their imposter syndrome, and this is something that we might touch upon in our conversation today, is it's not just about the work. They actually talk about them being a mom, like they feel as
Yes.
if they're just winging it in
Yes.
terms of being a mom. And they are always concerned about what people think, that people are judging them,
Yes.
that they're not taking good care of their kids, especially when they return to work. It's about balancing, and they have all these inner critic messages in their head. Oh, if I go back to work, does that mean that I'm a bad mom because
Yeah.
I'm neglecting my kids? But if I don't go back to work, am I being a bad role model to my kids by not trying to fulfill my
Yeah.
ambitions, or to provide for the family? So there's a lot of inner critic thoughts that mothers experience, especially when when they get back to work and try to manage family and work at the same time.
And I know we are bombarded with messages all day long. And although the models are starting to change in our society now, but for a very long time, women were expected to take care of everybody and themselves last. And most of the time, they didn't have time for themselves. So what I see with moms is that this image of the caretaker, the nurturer, the one who's going to take care of everybody before them is impacting a lot their imposter syndrome. That's sometimes where it stems from. Is that what you find too, or where does that imposter syndrome stem from?
Yes, I think there's a lot of social expectations that mothers need to fulfill. And when they are not achieving these expectations, all these inner critic messages are can be quite crippling and can be quite debilitating.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes it could really eat up your self-worth. Especially, we've been talking about being not the good mom, not the
Yes.
best mom. That's really something that we need to talk about as moms. If we
Yeah.
experience this, do talk to someone about it, because if you just keep it to yourself, then it's going to eat you up in ways that you couldn't really imagine.
Yes. Yes. And I see a lot of shame in admitting that. And what's funny is that the shame is to admit that publicly, but also to admit that to yourself.
Personally, yeah.
It's almost like when they feel like they are not a good mom, when they feel a bad mom, they right away repress that feeling and that thought because it's too painful to handle. Is that what you're finding too with the people that you help?
Yes, that's absolutely true. Well, you say that there's the shame, but it's also almost denying it to yourself that you need help actually, because you wouldn't want to admit it. If you admit that you are well, not necessarily a bad mom, but that you're not fulfilling what you think you should, then it doesn't really go, it's not aligned to
Yes.
what you were supposed to think. So there's a lot of disruption there. There's a lot of yeah, inner critic messages, and there are, fortunately, there are techniques that we can talk about today to remedy this. But it's really important to first of all acknowledge it and be aware of these thoughts that's been that's been bothering you.
And because some mom actually are aware that they are experiencing that feeling or that thought, but if they're not really conscious of it, because sometimes they're not conscious of it, they just feel something that is off, and they are very, you can feel emotions without exactly knowing what leads you there. What would be the first step to become aware and acknowledge it, in your opinion?
Oh goodness, that's really difficult to be honest. That's
Sorry.
really difficult. There's not an easy way because
Okay.
to do this, because yes, you are feeling something, but you couldn't really put your finger on it. You know
Yeah.
that something's not quite right. So what I would suggest, and this is actually the essence of PAME as well. PAME is actually a Greek word that means let's go together.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to imply here is that if you feel that something is not quite right, something is a bit off, talk to someone about it. You
Okay.
need to have someone with you to go through the journey with you. And
Yeah.
okay, for single moms, okay, you may not have a romantic partner or a partner at home, but you need to find that support network, your friends,
Yeah.
close family members who you can talk to, because sometimes yes, something is not quite right, or you might have all these limiting thoughts, all these thoughts, but you just couldn't get your head around it.
Yes.
Having another person to bounce back your thoughts, or just to keep an eye on you, can certainly help. So what I would say, if you're feeling a bit, reach out reach out to someone if you feel you need that support. And at the same time, if you feel that there's another person who needs that support, reach out as well. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? So it's a
Yes.
two-way thing. You are reaching out to ask for support, but you're also reaching out to also offer that support to others who might need it. So yeah, Pame, just remember, Pame, it's, let's go together. And in this journey, we can actually go together.
And that's where I always tell my listeners that no single mom should struggle alone. If they don't have someone in their physical proximity, if they don't have someone in their environment, there are Facebook groups like mine or yours. There are ways to reach out, because when you start expressing something to someone else, it brings light into it and it loosens its hold on us. We're not alone in our mind rehearsing the worst case scenario and making it bigger than what it is actually. We get some more external references, and that helps a lot.
Mm.
You mentioned techniques. What kind of techniques do you use to take care of the imposter syndrome?
Yes, well, I could probably share two techniques with your listeners today. The first technique, I love this technique. It's called the TLC technique. And basically, some self-help gurus will actually tell you to try to have a fight with your inner critic. Suppress all these inner critic messages. They are just distractions. Ignore them, avoid them. What I would say, be friendly with your inner critic, because whether you like it or not, your inner critic is still part
Yes.
of who you are,
Yes.
right? You have to acknowledge the emotions. You have to acknowledge the beliefs that your inner critic is telling you. You don't necessarily have to hold on to it, but you have to acknowledge that it exists. Okay?
Yes.
Yes. So
Because I know it sounds weird, but it's there to protect you. Even though it's misguided, it's still there to protect you.
exactly.
And you don't neutralize a dragon by fighting it, because it's going to throw flames at you. But if you are nice to him, feed it and love it, it will go down. It won't be aggressive. That's always the image that I use.
Exactly. Oh, that's a really good image, actually. If you try to fight it, it's just gonna get more aggressive
Yes.
at you. But also, yes, what I keep telling my readers as well, what I teach in the book is that yes, the inner critic is an inner critic, but because it's inside you, it's still part of who you are. And if you try to fight it, you'll end up having a battle with yourself, and someone's gonna get hurt, and that someone is still gonna be you, because it's still part of who you are. So what I would say is, first of all, be aware of your inner critic. Explore the messages, explore the feelings, whether it's anger, whether it is fear. And actually, we were talking about this earlier, Marielle. When
Yes.
it comes to fear,
Yes.
um, fear is not your enemy. Actually, that's the title of my third book. Fear is something that is essential to our survival. We
Yes.
wouldn't survive as a species if we didn't experience fear. But
Yes.
fear can trigger that primitive response in your brain to fight, flight, freeze, or flop. But you need to learn to acknowledge fear and learn how to manage it. Now,
Yes.
let me go back to the TLC technique, because we're drifting on. But the TLC technique is acknowledging that you have this fear, or you have all this self-doubt, all this anxiety, or whatever. You acknowledge it, but you also give it the TLC treatment. You don't
Yes.
fight it, you give it a bit of TLC. That doesn't mean tender loving care. The TLC technique is actually a questioning strategy that encourages you to ask three questions. You ask, is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? That's what it stands for. So, for
Okay.
example, with you as a mom, and you're telling yourself, I'm a bad mom. I'm just not good at this parenting thing. Ask, is it true that you are a bad mom? And you might say to yourself, yes, I am a bad mom. Ask, what evidence do you have? What evidence could actually show that you are a bad mom? Because 9 out of 10 times you are probably doing what you can, and you try to bring out the best of, in terms of what you can give to your children. So always ask the question. If your inner critic message is telling you all these unhelpful things, the first question is ask, is it true? So, and most of the time, you might say, yes, it's true because it's deeply ingrained in you.
Yes.
But the follow-up question is that, where are you basing that answer on? Where's your evidence? Or are you the only one who believes this? But, you have to find evidence to support if it is true. The second question is ask, is it logical? So for example, if you're saying, okay, I'm not good at this, I'll never be good at this parenting thing. I'll always mess things up. I will always make mistakes. Ask the question, is it logical? Just because you made a mistake now, does it mean that you will make a mistake again?
Yeah.
Is it logical that if you do something now, is it logical that you're not going to learn from it? Or if you keep practicing the same thing over and over and over again, the logical thing is that you will learn and it will become easier for you as you gain more experience, as you gain more practice. So if it is true that you're actually not really good at this yet because you are still learning, the second question is it logical? Just because it is hard now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be hard forever.
Yeah.
Or just because you're making mistakes now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to learn from it. Or just because it's not too easy right now, it's gonna get easier later on because it's with experience, it's with practice, it's with learning. So that's the second question. Ask, is it logical? The final question is you have to ask, is it constructive? If you keep telling yourself, I'm a bad mom, ask, what good is that doing to you?
Yes.
How constructive is that? How is that helping you? How is that helping your kids? Does it make any sense? So actually the final question, is it constructive, usually just takes care of everything.
Yeah.
Because it makes you aware that this thinking doesn't actually help anyone.
Yes.
So that's actually the TLC technique. So first you have to acknowledge your inner critic. You have to acknowledge all these beliefs, all these emotions. Be friendly with it. Give it the TLC treatment and ask, is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? And if you follow that sequence, it may be easier for you to reframe the messages and find better ways to talk to yourself.
Yes, because when you do something over and over that doesn't serve you, it defies the purpose. Just that question alone, like you were saying, would literally have you drop that whatever you're doing, because it's nonsense. It's crazy.
Yes, absolutely. But another word of warning, actually, sometimes the TLC technique doesn't work for some people simply because the thoughts are so ingrained in them. Maybe they've been holding it for 30 years.
Yes.
So they actually believe it to be true. And there's no way that they could reframe it because it's deeply ingrained. For some people who experience imposter syndrome, they would actually say, it's not that I have imposter syndrome, it's that I'm actually an imposter.
Yes.
So the remedy for that is, if you want to use the TLC technique and it's not really working for you, you need to get a third person to engage in that dialogue with you. So it's a three-way conversation between you, your inner critic, and a third party. Because
Yes.
that third party will actually say, is it true that you're a bad mom? And you'll say, yes, it's true, I'm a bad mom. And the third person will say, I don't think so. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's having that other perspective, because if you've been so close with your inner critic for so long, it would be quite hard to let go.
True. And don't take somebody that is critical herself, because that won't help. Take somebody that you really trust. And if you don't have that person in your life, find it. Like I was mentioning, there are a lot of online resources. Before we go to the other technique, I want to talk. Christine put a comment here that refers to our inner critic and the way it was imprinted in us. She says, great message you're sharing today. We learned from our mothers that we should put our family's needs first over our own. We are too afraid to admit our own issues. And that's so true. That's what, up to now, the message is changing though. I know that's not what I'm teaching my kids, but it took a long time before we got here. So that's one technique. Do you have the second one that you mentioned earlier? Is it
Yes.
something?
The second technique is actually quite simpler than the TLC technique. Because the TLC technique is something that we actually use in therapy. In psychology, you have this. It draws upon rational emotive therapy. Challenging your thoughts and trying to reframe it in a different light. But the second technique that I will share is called the flashlight technique, and it's actually quite simple. What you need to do is to imagine that you're holding a flashlight. Okay. And the flashlight can only flash the light at one spot at a time. So you can either flash the light to yourself or you can flash the light to outside. So what happens is if you flash the light onto yourself and you're feeling self-doubt, you're feeling insecure, you're feeling stressed and anxious and so on, that's the only thing that you will see because your attention is drawn into all these negativity. You're focusing on that. But if you flash the light out and focus your attention on, your children, or focus your attention to the community, or in terms of business, or for example, you focus your attention to the people you're aiming to serve, you see them. You see their needs, you see their goals, their aspirations. So it doesn't really matter how you are feeling about yourself. What matters is those people outside you. You focus your attention on how you could serve them. You focus your attention on how you can help them and fulfill their needs and aspirations. So if you're feeling as if you are a bad mom and you are doubting your abilities, flash the light out. Focus the attention on to your children. What do they need? What are their goals, their aspirations? And do whatever it takes for you to help them achieve that. It doesn't matter how you feel about yourself. What matters is the people around you. So yeah, the flashlight technique is simpler in that it draws the attention away from you and you focus more on the people around you. That's what it is.
Yes, and that we use a lot in business as well, because when people are afraid, for example, to go on camera, I know I used to teach a self-confidence class, and they were terrified. And like you said, when you show the light and you go with a different purpose in mind, it's not about you anymore. It's about serving whoever is listening to you, whether it be your kids, serving them and their needs, serve your audience, serve your clients. And then the fear vanishes because it's not about you anymore. There is no judgment there.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, Christine said she loves the flashlight technique, and I actually get that reaction a lot. I've spoken to moms. They were freelancing moms, and every time I talk about the flashlight technique, you have these light bulb moments, flashing. It's really just taking the spotlight away from you
Yes.
and aiming to serve others. I use this technique to with my students because I actually do teach aspiring authors how to write and self-publish their books, and many of them, they are actually afraid to write their story. They are afraid
Yes.
to share their knowledge and experience because they would say I'm not an expert enough, or I don't know enough, people are gonna judge me. And then I ask them, who are your readers? Who are the
Yes.
people who can benefit from your message? Who are the people who can benefit from your story? And when you switch that, from me to actually them, you get energized, and you forget, actually it's not about me anymore. There are people out there who can benefit from it, and I just have to do it. Even if I'm scared, even
Yes.
if I'm doubtful about myself, it doesn't matter. There are people who can benefit from it, and I should do this for them.
Because it almost becomes like the way I explain it, because I infuse spirituality in my coaching and in my teaching. It becomes a divine matching. It's like you were matched with the people that you could serve, whether you're scared or not. Then it becomes your duty almost to
Mm-hmm,
show up
mm-hmm.
to the task, no matter how you feel. And then when you start really connecting that way, the fear literally dissolves. It's almost magical. It's so powerful.
I know. I've had this same reactions from, from my students who actually practice the flashlight technique. It's
Yes.
almost instant like that. It's really quite simple. And when you forget, shine the light out again. Just
It's so
always
simple to
remember.
remember with that name. It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Before by the way, you can ask questions here below, or you can send questions in email too, and I'll forward them to Amy later if you do. I actually have one question that was forwarded to me. Before we answer questions, I'm going to take a break for our audio listeners here. If you don't know, we are on Facebook every week and sometimes twice a week on facebook.com, Your French Life Coach. And you can attend those interviews live, or you can come and watch them on replay and interact with us and also be part of a community. Amy was talking about talking to other people and reaching out. That's the way to do it. Be part of communities. So we're going to take a break and we'll be back. If I can find my, oh, well, yes. So Christine said it will help to raise your vibration. And I love that too. I talk a lot about energy. Do you talk a lot about energy in your coaching, or do you just go mainstream psychology?
Well, I have to say the PAMI code, I said it is let's go together in Greek,
Yes.
but it's an acronym that means purpose, action, momentum, and energy. So it's about rooting yourself in your purpose, taking action, consistent action, so you have momentum, and also, raising your vibrations, your energy, keeping the energy up. So yes, it's really important, the energy aspect of what we do.
Okay, I don't see any questions here. I have a question that I will ask you. We're going to go back, and I received a question through email because I announced that to my email list. So let's go back to the actual episode. And thank you for the people on Facebook for being here. I love interacting with you. So let's go back. And we're back with our guest, Dr. Emee Vida Estacio. By the way, did I pronounce your name right? How do you pronounce it?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't butcher it. I have a question that I received through email about the imposter syndrome, and she mentioned that she herself had a mother who's very critical, and that whenever she tries to work on herself about feeling like a bad mom, it's reinforced by her mom's criticism over and over. What could she do? She cannot cut the tie with her mom, or cut the relationship. Is there a way to deal with that?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I talk about this in my book, and actually, this is the third remedy. I said I'm gonna share two remedies, but actually there is a third one. When you are experiencing external critics, it's not an inner critic anymore. It's an external critic. So it's the third remedy actually is it's having supportive environments. It's really important to have supportive environments. Now, when you have a mom, or for or partners, or people around you who would have this negativity, and you cannot really cut your ties, actually you might have to ask that question: are you sure you can't cut your ties? Is it true? Again, you can use the TLC technique here. Yeah. Is it true that you have to keep your ties? Is it logical to continue listening to these messages? And is it constructive to how is it helping you to stay connected with these people? Because if their messages are draining you, or eating you up, how constructive is that? Or if you can flip it, actually, what can you do to make it constructive? Is there anything that you can do to make it constructive? So, yeah, the third remedy is actually, yes, have a supportive environment. But if it is not possible, because you have these ties, use the TLC sequence to see
Yeah.
if you really have to keep these ties. If it is true that you do, whatever they say, use the TLC questioning sequence again. So if they are saying that you are a bad mom, use the TLC sequence. If
Yeah.
they are saying, you should prioritize your children, which is actually fine, but at the expense of neglecting yourself,
Yeah.
again, as the TLC, use the TLC sequence. Is it true that I have to neglect myself? Okay, it is true that I have to look after my children, but is it true that it should be at the expense of my own well-being? Is it logical if you become unwell physically, psychologically, or financially, whatever? Is it logical? How shall I say this? Is it logical for you to be able to provide better care or to take care of your children if you aren't well yourself? And is it constructive? How is this thought? How is this message helping you or others around you? So the remedy, use the TLC technique once again. Whether it's an internal critic or an external critic, in
Yes.
this case, same technique applies.
And I found that because I had sometimes in my family comments like that when you do something, because there is a difference in generations and the way we were raised and whatever we know in psychology today that they didn't know then.
Hmm.
Having compassion, first of all, for the person who's telling you that, because that's the best they can do in the moment. That's what they've learned themselves. That's what they lived by themselves. And if they suddenly turn around and say, "Oh, it was all garbage," then how painful will it be for them? So they sometimes change. But what I found is that either talking with the person from heart to heart and explaining, "Hey, when you do that, I really feel bad about myself. Can you please stop doing that? Because I can't listen to that. I can't hear that.
Mm.
It weakens me." Sometimes it works if the relationship is not too toxic.
Yeah.
And the other thing that helps also is minimizing the time we spend with these people.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they're fine for like an hour, everything goes well, and then they start going into the criticism. Then just spend an hour and really enjoy the good side of it.
Exactly. Sometimes, you can enjoy the company of these people in small doses.
Yes.
In small doses, but sometimes more than an hour, or
Yeah.
you need to know your limits as well, and look after yourself in that way. It's not that you're cutting your ties off completely,
Yes.
but it's just making sure that you just get the right dose at a
Yes.
time.
It's like, I'm French, so of course I love food. It's like chocolate. You can have a little bit every so often, but
You
if you
enjoy
too
it.
much, you're going to be sick. So same thing.
Yeah, same thing with these relationships.
Where can people find you? And I will put links to your books in the description of this episode, because that way people can buy it and use the techniques in there. If they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
They can just find me on thepamicode.com. So you can see all of my books there. It's available on Amazon, on Kindle, print, or audiobook. So they can connect through there. Or if they would like a coaching session, for example, I also offer one-to-one coaching. If you're experiencing imposter syndrome, I have a 4-week program to help you remedy your imposter syndrome. We could bounce off each other and explore your inner critic messages. But I also have packages for stress management, or returning to work, early career guidance, so on and so forth. So, but if they'd like to know more and see information about me, just go to thepamico.com, and you'll see all the links for my books there, and also the coaching services as well.
Great, thank you. And before we go, there are 2 questions that I ask every guest, because I find that self-love is crucial, but many women do not even know where to start or what it means for them. So I love asking my guests for their definition of self-love. So what is yours?
For me, it's actually appreciating your worth. It's acknowledging who you are, and appreciating and value yourself for who you are. And if you're asking where to start, it's all about embracing everything about you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they say. But it's acknowledging that you are human, and you appreciate yourself, you appreciate your worth for your flaws, strengths, and limitations. Everything, you embrace it because that's who you are.
Yes, yes, radical self-acceptance. It's very, very powerful. If there was one thing you wanted to leave the audience with, the most important thing for you to tell them, what would it be?
Well, when it comes to managing your imposter syndrome, and especially if you're feeling that you're not a good mom, don't worry. You're not the only one who feels this way. There's no shame in feeling this way. We all go through this at some point in our experience as a mom. Reach out to someone if you are, if you feel that something is not quite right,
Yeah.
and practice the TLC technique. Get to know
Yes.
your inner critic and always ask, is it true? Is it logical? Is it constructive? And try to reframe it in a way that will be beneficial to you and your children.
Yes. And teach it to your children too, because that
Exactly.
will serve
Yeah.
them. Yeah. Thank you so much, Amy, for being our guest today. That was very rich. And as I said, you're such an expert in what you're talking about. Thank you for being here and helping our single moms deal with their imposter syndrome. And for our audience, I'll see you in the next episode. And don't forget, you can submit questions or topics either here on Facebook, on private messages, or on my website at singleanddoingitall.com. I'm here to help, and that's my purpose and my mission. Have a wonderful end of your week.